Hello and welcome to a special Smaulgld report on the Special Counsel investigation into Russian collusion into the 2016 presidential election. Mueller finds, indicts Russian internet trolls. What happened? Well, on Friday, late Friday, Rod Rosenstein, the deputy FBI director, not Mueller, announced indictments of Russian internet trolls. And part of the indictment, Rosenstein in his announcement noted that there was no allegation of American involvement or election impact in this particular indictment. So basically what you have are findings that there were Russians out there, 3 entities and 13 individuals that were involved in placing anti-Hillary Clinton and also anti-Trump information on the web and also organizing rallies both for and against Donald Trump. So this shows that there was indeed some type of Russian meddling in the presidential election, but does not in any way, shape, or form, at least according to this indictment, say that any Americans, including any Trump campaign surrogates, were involved in it, and also noted that they had absolutely no impact. So basically they were saying beginning in 2014, before Trump was even a factor, with near certainty these 13 Russians were trying to influence the election. However, we also know that there's probably others, not just Russians, but people of all political, across the political spectrum, across all the different countries. There probably were others also trying to interfere with the U.S. political process, but because this investigation was focused on Russians, they managed to find evidence that Russians had done this. Now, I view this, and we're going to explain why. We go through the reaction to this. These are face-saving charges because they had to find something. You don't appoint a special counsel to investigate a crime and not find anything. They have to find criminal behavior. To date, the special counsel has found supposed criminal activity from Flynn, Manafort, and I forgot the name of the other individual, but they had all been charged with crimes with nothing to do with Russian collusion or anything even to do with the election. Flynn was charged with lying to an FBI person. Manafort and the other guy are in trouble for their dealings with Russia, but having nothing to do with, they're not registered as foreign agents properly, but nothing to do with the election or the Trump campaign. So now, one of the problems that they've had is that people are saying that Russians, this whole story about Russians being involved in trying to mess up the election, that's a hoax. So now they've come up with, and they've actually found some Russians that were involved. And I don't think this was ever a doubt that Russians were involved, just as I wouldn't think there'd be any doubt that Chinese or other foreign entities were involved in trying to impact the election. But since they've made the boogeyman out to be the Russians and they've tried to tie Trump with the Russians, if they can't try Trump to the Russians, what they had to do was, in order to justify this special counsel, actually find evidence and proof that the Russians were indeed trying to influence the election. Now, what they found, however, I find is quite comical. And in fact, I was going to include this in the Moronica section, but it deserves its own segment. Because if you really go through what they found and whom they are indicting, it actually is pretty comical. So let's take a look at what they've actually found and what they are indicting these Russians for. Well, here's one, the DOJ complaint. Russians organized a rally called "Trump is not my president." So basically the Russians, while they may have favored Hillary Clinton, their main goal wasn't to get Trump elected, it appears. It was basically to sow discord in the American political process, which makes sense. That's what foreign countries do. I'm sure the United States does it in other countries, and I'm sure other countries other than Russia try to do the same. But here's what I find comical. Here's some of the things that the Russian trolls on the internet were saying. Join our Hillary for Prison 2016. Donald wants to defeat terrorism. Hillary wants to sponsor it. Vote Republican, vote Trump, and support the Second Amendment. Hillary Clinton doesn't deserve the black vote. Okay, this is trolling 101. There's nothing particularly clever about it. There's nothing particularly influential or damaging about it. However, these are the types of things that they caught these Russian trolls doing. I guess Maxine Waters is going to be disappointed because at one point, if you recall, she said that Donald Trump was taking orders from Putin, and Putin directed Trump to call Hillary Clinton Crooked Hillary. Well, there's no evidence of that, but there was evidence that Russians were out there saying, we cannot trust Hillary to take care of our veterans. This isn't even good trolling. So I'm not sure why you would indict them for this. We're going to see. There's really not much they can do about this. And they're going to try to make this sound like Trump's not doing his job. He's dismissed. There's this Russian intervention. He's turned a blind eye to it. He's actually called it a hoax. They're trying to change the narrative away from he was involved with the Russians to he is dismissing this mega indictment of Russian trolls out there that are interfering with, quote, our democracy. So the first thing Trump did was, his reaction was, this has nothing to do with me. We did nothing wrong. The narrative is now shifting to, okay, Donald, but now that you know about this and you've known about it and you've refused to listen to the top intelligence agencies for a year, what are you going to do about it? So they're trying to still make it sound like Donald Trump is not doing anything, notwithstanding the fact that this started in 2014. The Obama administration had 2 years to deal with it and somehow didn't deal with it. All right, so Trump is the biggest troll on the internet. So here's my reaction initially when I heard this was multi-million-dollar special counsel investigation finds Russian internet trolls. I was also surprised that the special prosecutor is not needed to catch a bunch of Russians trolling the internet. The FBI special counsel and 25 attorneys, remember these are the 25 attorneys, all Democrats donated to Democratic causes, that were assigned to the case, they learned after a year of investigation that trolling goes on the internet. And here's the Casablanca analogy here. I'm shocked to find that there are trolls on the internet. Now, of course, trolling on the internet not only is not new, it's not unknown, but everyone on the internet, including the mainstream media, the alternative media, Russians, Bulgarians, Chinese, everyday people are trying to influence opinion. So I'm not even sure this is a chargeable offense that people are out there trolling. Now, of course, they're foreigners. There's probably some law that they can't do this. But we're going to see these Russians aren't even in the country. And I don't know how you stop this. And I don't even know whether you even want to try to stop it, because it's so inconsequential. People trolling, saying things like Hillary for prison 2016. I'm not sure what impact. They even said it had no impact on the election. So why does Donald Trump have to put resources onto stopping this? And why did we have to spend an entire investigation trying to find this? Well, obviously, this is not what they were trying to find. This is what they've now found in order to justify them spending all this time on it. A whole year, and this is what they come up with, Boris and Smaulgld, they were trolling internet, trying to get Hillary elected. Nonsense. This is Moronica. Now, here's a guy, he says, he makes a good point. I read the entire indictment of these Russian internet trolls, but I'm thinking there's some serious First Amendment with prosecuting someone for trying to influence election. Yeah, and I look at it and I said, well, the only thing they could have done wrong was there was something that they had committed identity theft. Now, I don't know if that was real identity theft or just like taking somebody's Twitter handle. I didn't quite understand that. But the point being is that saying stuff online, is that really going to influence the elections? And it's really a national security? I just shaking my head at this because it doesn't make that much sense to me. You know, so here's what I wrote. Today, I already identified 5 internet trolls that I disagree with that were a threat to our democracy. Can I get a special prosecutor? Now, I say that tongue-in-cheek, but that's basically what they're saying here is they've got a special prosecutor, and now Trump must act, or he's, I guess, now that's how you're going to prove collusion with the Russians. He's known about this, he's sitting on it, and our democracy is under siege, and Adam Schiff is going to blow a gasket if something isn't done. So my takeaway from all this, from the Mueller indictments, was that trolling Hillary is an indictable offense. I don't see, other than that, what the big deal is here. Now, I reserve the right to say that if this is only the beginning, and if somehow they do tie Trump to all these trolls, then you might have some issues with collusion and so on. But I think if they were going to say that, they would have come out already. I think this is their fallback, their way of saving some type of face, because the other indictments had nothing to do with the election. They had to do with the individual circumstances of the people they indicted, Manafort and Flynn. This actually goes to the heart of the issue, interfering with our democracy. But then they even have to say that it had no impact. Now, how did the mainstream media react to this? You would think they'd say, okay, well, there's not much to see here. John, how'd I do, boss? Harwood. Now, here's the guy who's in the tank for the DNC as from the WikiLeaks, basically talking to Podesta and trying to make sure he's asking the right questions of Trump and really getting in on the good side there. And this is false. Mueller says Russians communicated with the 2016 Trump campaign staff and offered U.S. citizens money to participate in Trump rallies. Yeah, but it doesn't say that none of this actually, the Trump campaign actually went ahead and took their money and colluded. That's not what the indictment says. It makes clear that the Trump campaign, well, not that the Trump campaign wasn't involved, but that no Americans were involved. And if you do your logic, if the Trump campaign people are Americans and no Americans were involved, then the Trump campaign people were not involved. But what people do know about John Harwood, he actually colluded with the Clinton campaign. Now, he may not be a foreigner, but I would think people like he and Donna Brazile and others that were not just friendly to the Clinton campaign, but actually acting as helping Hillary Clinton, Brazile giving the debate questions to her in advance. There really was mainstream media collusion with the Clinton campaign to help her. And also, it seems to be there's mainstream media collusion also not just in with the Clinton campaign, but in promoting this Russian interference narrative. So let's take a look at some other things here. Well, people are saying this didn't impact their vote. I would say that the Russians had far less impact in making anyone think to vote for Donald Trump, but I do believe that the mainstream media had a lot more impact on helping Hillary Clinton. And the Bernie Sanders people would agree with that, was they helped Hillary Clinton beat Bernie Sanders. They covered for her. They covered for as much as they could. And according to the Podesta emails, there was a lot more going on in terms of collusion between the DNC and the mainstream media. Now, here's Chuck Todd from Meet the Depressed. This is Moronica. If you work in American politics or in the government on any level, and your first reaction to Mueller's indictment is not how we're going to prevent this from happening again and how we're going to punish Russia, then you need to rethink your priorities as a citizen. So here we start a whole new line of thinking. The guy's anticipating this is a bunch of nonsense. No one's going to care about it. A bunch of Russian trolls, Boris and Ivanka on the internet, making up memes, trying to affect election. He's trying to make this sound like this is a huge deal. It's not a huge deal. And he's saying don't react to this as it's not a huge deal, but we're first responsibility as citizens, as Americans, is how do we stop those Russian trolls and punish them? That's a joke. That is truly a joke. This is not the most pressing issue in the United States, that there's Russian trolls on the internet, especially after we have school shooting issues. There's so many issues. Debt is a threat to our national security, our relations with China. It's not Russian trolls. Trolls, I rate to Chucky here, are a fact of life, and they can be ignored. The mainstream media is not as easy to dismiss. This guy's on Meet the Depressed every weekend. He's got a big audience. But the real question is, how do we stop the mainstream media from colluding with their favorite politicians and to report the news instead? The Washington Post, what do they say? Justice Department deals fatal blow to Trump's Russian hoax. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. Quotes Trump tweet saying collusion charge is a hoax. Then says Mueller indictments which do not allege collusion have destroyed Trump's claim. Okay, so if there's no collusion, then it is a hoax. I don't think Trump ever said that there aren't Russian trolls, and I'm sure he wouldn't deny there's not Chinese trolls. Trolls from every country who are trying to disrupt the election. His point about it being a hoax is that somehow there was a massive campaign where the Russians and the Trump campaign were colluding to overturn the election, and that it was successful. NBC News. Mueller calls Trump's Russia's bluff. Mueller spent... No, they didn't call any bluff. Mueller, first of all, if Mueller wanted to call a bluff, he would have gone on the press conference. He would have editorialized about the indictment. He didn't even show up. He sends out Rod Rosenstein. This is nonsense. Mueller spent a year and millions of dollars to find 13 Russian internet trolls. You know, you give him another year. I guarantee you he can find 23 Chinese trolls. He can find 12 Romanian trolls. He can find trolls everywhere. They're all over the internet. They're all trying to influence the election. Andrea Mitchell. Well, what does Andrea Mitchell say? No, okay. So she quotes Rosenstein, no allegation that any American aware of what Russians were doing. She's twisting that to, that's actually exonerating language, that there was no allegation that the Americans were aware of what the Russians were doing, meaning no collusion, and no allegation or Russian operations changed the election outcome. She says, this is a reminder Americans should be careful what they read online. Well, the obvious response to that is people should be careful what they read from you, MSNBC, CNN, Fox, all of them, not just anything that they read online. Unbelievable that this is her reaction, that, wow, people were unaware that there's Russian trolls out there. I think people are aware every day that there's trolls out there. It's part and parcel. They just don't have to focus on it, that this is the most important thing when they're online. Just like when Twitter sent out, you may have interacted with a Russian or a Russian bot during the 2016 election. And no kidding. In fact, if you go back to what we looked at, some of those quotes and statements, if you didn't like Hillary Clinton and a Russian troll or a Russian bot wrote Hillary for prison 2016 and you liked it, ooh, you interacted with a Russian, you're part, it's unbelievable how they're making this out to be a big deal. It's nothing. But then it gets worse. That's the mainstream media. You get the former Obama administration people making a big deal out of this. Now, the thing about the Obama administration is this happened during the Obama administration. So if Trump is saying it was a hoax and it didn't happen, well, he didn't even know what was going on in 2014, 15, and 16 because he wasn't in charge. It's ludicrous for them to even trot out and make it sound like, well, Trump has to do something about it now, when they denied it happened. Then all of a sudden they decided it did happen and now it's Trump's fault. Okay, so Brennan, CIA chief Brennan, this guy, I think Brennan is now a CNN commentator. What does he say? He says the DOJ, I'm going to have to laugh when I read this. The DOJ statement and indictments reveal the extent, yes, and motivations of Russian interference in the 2016 election. Everyone who goes online to try to influence has a motivation. They may have the biggest motivation because anybody puts out a tweet hopes that it influences whomever reads it. And they also hope as many people as possible read it. So that's just stupid to say they reveal the extent and motivations of Russian interference in the 2000s. No, they don't. The interference in the election was zero, according to the indictment. Claims of hoax in tatters, says Brennan. No, the claim of hoax that Trump colluded is in tatters. No one ever said there aren't trolls on the internet. It would be a hoax to say there are no trolls. My take, this is John Brennan, intelligence implausible that Russian actions did not influence the views and votes of at least some Americans. Yeah, that's true. I would say anything that anyone posts, that's the intent, and that's always going to be the case. And you're not going to be able to purge people who might have an influence on somebody's vote. Unbelievable. Now, I laugh at the people who, you people who listen to me, and it's probably anybody who's listening to me now has probably heard me before. There's probably very few new listeners know that I am objective. And I'm not basing my point of view because, in fact, you know my view. I like gold and silver, but I don't like to hear stuff about gold and silver that's positive if it isn't true. It's the same here. I think the people that hate Trump, they so ardently wish to believe that there's Russian collusion. They have no reason to believe that other than they've been told that or they want to believe it. There's nothing out there that has said to me, and I look at all the evidence that says Russian and his staff were involved seriously in working with Russians. There's been no evidence put forward to date, but yet they insist that it happened. And other than they want to believe it, I really don't understand where they come up with that it happened. This should tell them. They just showed that, yes, Russians colluded in the election. Not colluded, tried to influence the election. but doesn't show they colluded with the Trump campaign or any Americans, and it doesn't even show that they were successful. This is interesting. Everything the media accuses Trump of doing with Russia, Obama actually did. Madeleine It Was Worth It Albright, another Obama person. She's claiming, again, this should be in Veronica. This one, I don't know, her statement about how it was worth invading Iraq and killing millions, or whatever the number was, children, and what was worth it. That'll live in infamy. But here's what she says. The only thing more stunning than the scale of Russian interference uncovered today. There was nothing stunning about Boris and Ivanka trolling, say, Hillary for prison. There's nothing stunning about that. Is the fact that the American president is taking no action to protect our country against an ongoing threat. Yes, I guess we should order a full scale of invasion and bomb every piece of Russia until they stop internet trolling. She says this is a dereliction of duty. This is Veronica. Now, Eric Fast and Furious and in contempt of Congress holder. What does he come out and say? Well, actually, it's the gall or the chutzpah, as they would say in New York, that these people have. They actually say what they're saying. This guy Holder, the administration has been in power for over a year now. They've done nothing to protect our electoral systems from further attacks or to deal meaningfully with the opioid crisis. Inexcusable. First of all, this has nothing to do with opioid crisis. Okay, maybe he has a point there. Maybe he throws the point in to make sure that people realize his first point is devoid of any point. And if there was a point, guess who was the Attorney General up until 2015? Eric, Fast and Furious and in contempt of Congress, Holder. So he didn't do anything about this. And now he's saying, well, it's Trump's fault. He hasn't done anything. Oh, by the way, there's an opioid crisis. And who could ever forget, under the Obama administration, there's President Obama saying, when Mitt Romney says our biggest threat is Russia, Obama says, hey, he's cold and they want their foreign policy back. Okay, so the Obama administration thought nothing that Russia was, the Cold War was over. You know, there's no reason we bother the Cold War. Now they're telling us the Russians invaded the United States during 2014, 15, and 16, destroyed, or they're trying to say, even though the indictment doesn't say this, they destroyed the electoral process with this massive extent of Russian internet trolling. It's unbelievable interference in our democracy. Yeah, it happened under the Obama administration. I don't even think it happened. I think the Obama administration was right not to be making a big deal out of it. They're only making a big deal out of it now because that's what they have to hang their hat on, because they haven't found collusion, and they can now blame Trump for not doing anything about it. This is a dereliction of duty. Now, I know it's treason. I mean, he's calling it a hoax. This isn't a hoax. This is real life stuff. Well, here's Trish Reagan. This was a sensible point of view. She said, instead of protecting our citizens at home, our FBI is too busy getting played by the Russians. What she means is the Steele dossier, the Russians, that Steele dossier comes from Russian sources, were feeding the FBI this stuff about Trump and getting a FISA warrant. Meanwhile, the Russians supposedly are destroying our democracy with their trolling online. Okay. So what's all this? What does all this mean? Well, first of all, I don't want to bring the school shooting into, but apparently that they don't really have enough in the FBI to deal with tips, and things fall through the cracks. You can't blame the FBI for preventing crimes. I mean, it's not a police state. Somebody's acting suspiciously. You just don't throw people in jail. However, the zealousness at which they did put some of their resources on this Russian trolling is questionable. It just seemed to be a misallocation of resources. I don't think this would have been that big of a deal if Hillary Clinton had won. I don't think we'd have an investigation into finding Russian trolls online. If you remember, this all came up the day after the election. All of a sudden, it was Russia this, Russia that. Before that, there wasn't an issue. I don't think it ever would have come up again. But I think the FBI should be more concerned about fighting, preventing crime than chasing Russian trolls off the internet. But what happens next? This guy, Mark Simone, I think he's a Doesn't matter who he is. I think he's a talk show host. But anyway, he makes a good point here. Who's Mueller kidding? None of the 13 Facebook trolls he indicted are in custody, never will be. They're not in our country, and they'll never be arrested or tried. So again, this is just face saving. We found the Russian interference there. Now it's Trump's fault. It's always going to be Trump's fault. The indictment was only symbolic. Bingo. And they have officially announced no collusion and no effect on the election. So again, this is really, as I stated at the outset, something that they just want to hang out there and say, well, see, this investigation was purposeful, it was important. We found Russian trolls. Anyone could have found a Russian troll without spending a year and millions of dollars trying to find it. My conclusion, the objective of the special prosecutor was never to determine the extent of Russian internet trolling or interference in our democracy. You could have done that with a Senate investigation. You could have done that, and they could have worked with the internet companies, with the AT&T, with Facebook, Twitter. Now, this was politically motivated, anti-Trump from the start because our democracy gave the wrong result. Thanks for listening.